Let's talk about matrices. If someone tells you, let A be a matrix, and let X and Y be vectors. Consider this equation, they say. AX equals Y. Then what do you see when you look at this equation? Which image pops up in your head when you look at this equation? What do you associate with this? Well, sometimes the only thing that pops up in your head is probably just like, maybe it's just 3 times x equals y. A very typical equation that's what we normally, just associate with normal numbers and not matrices. And that's something that happens quite often because sometimes the way that an equation is formatted when it's written by a computer or in LaTeX or something is just in cursive. You don't have the nice double lines and underscores and stuff that tell you, well, this is a vector and this is a matrix, and remind you of that again and again. So sometimes when you see something like this, then the only thing you think is, well, it's just a number times x equals a variable y, which is just one-dimensional. And of course, that could also be the case. But at other times, what some people think of is something that kind of looks like this. Like, for example, they imagine A to be a matrix that maybe looks something like this, and then they imagine X to be a vector consisting of 2 elements, x1 and x2, for example, and then they imagine Y to be another vector consisting of 2 elements, y1 and y2. So this is another kind of image that pops up in some other people's heads. And of course, this is also the kind of conceptual construct that this equation stands for. Now, the third way you might associate examples to this equation, ax equals y, is something that looks like this. Well, basically what happens when you take a matrix and multiply it with a vector is, well, you do matrix multiplication, right? So some people imagine instead of this version with the matrix and the vector and another vector, then they just imagine the coefficients in the matrix already multiplied onto the x variables. So they think about systems of linear equations. x1 plus 2x2 equals y1, and 2x1 plus x2 equals y2. So that's what a third group of people might be thinking. Now, there's nothing wrong with thinking this or this or this, but personally, I would like to recommend you to practice trying to associate all 3 kinds of images with this thing here, because as soon as you get used to that a bit more, then it kind of demystifies this whole notation with matrices and vectors and stuff. And of course, if you're an expert in linear algebra, or if you've taken the course and you still remember it, then really good for you. But if you don't, then just each time you see something like this, try to come up with examples of what it might stand for. It's a good kind of brain practice.